Now, in November of 2021, the federal government announced that it will remove fuel subsidy and replace it with a monthly 5,000 naira transport grant for poor Nigerians. The Nigeria Labour Congress responded to the news, resolving to hold a national protest on February the 1st of 2022, which will be against it. Now, the back and forth for the removal of subsidies did not, however, start today. Recall that in 2012, when former President Goodluck Jonathan announced the removal of fuel subsidies, there was a massive protest in the country. This had increased fuel prices from 65 naira to 141 naira. A similar protest was held in 2000 when former President Olusegun Obasanjo attempted to remove fuel subsidies, which he said cost the government $2 billion annually. Then, however, with the fuel pump price currently at about 167 naira, which would be the new price, is it the right move for our country at this point to go ahead with the fuel subsidy removal? Well, joining us to discuss this is Richard Inoyo. He's a financial analyst, and Andy Akpotive, who's a public affairs analyst. Thank you very much, Richard, for joining us. Richard, can you hear me?
Thank you for having me.
Great. Good.
I can hear you.
Great. Let's start by, the situation. I mean, we have laid a foundation for the fuel subsidy removal. But then a lot of people, like me, are still stuck at the 5,000 naira monthly grant for poor people. How does this add up to the average Nigerian who's trying to understand what this means and why government has come up with this 5,000 naira grant?
Well, let me start by saying that the government seems not to care about economic arguments. And there are those of us who believe that the argument is not about fuel subsidy. The argument is about refinery. Okay, this is a country with over 70 billion barrels of crude oil beneath our soil and water. And yet we don't have functional as a refineries. And that is just quite sad. Okay? So the argument is not about fuel subsidy. The argument for those of us on the other side is how well have we been able to develop our refinery and to ensure that they're efficient. So this whole idea of fuel subsidy and the so-called grants for transportation, for me, is just a distraction. Okay? It's like someone having his roof leaking, and then someone is saying that you have to blame the rain for falling. So I think the arguments being made by the federal government is invalid. And it's sad because if we follow the paths in which the federal government wants this country to toll, in a country where you don't have constant electricity, where you have to rely on fuel to be able to power your commercial, industrial, and residential assets, that's simply means that you have to rely on fuel. And if the price goes up, people will not be able to drive the business objective, and that will force them to leave. So if not for anything, our focus should be how can we build our refineries and how can we build more refineries, and not the whole idea of linking increase in price of fuel to fuel subsidy. So I think right now it looks to me that fuel subsidy is now a metaphor to increasing the price of fuel, not necessarily addressing the fundamental reason why there's even fuel subsidy in the first instance. If we have our refineries working, we won't be discussing about fuel subsidy. So for me, the policy is just anti-Nigerian. It is draconian to the business environment, and is dangerous for the economic future of this great country.
Now, a lot of people are saying that if the fuel price is raised to about 340 naira, which is somewhat the proposed price, that it might worsen and shrink the GDP of the country. Can you say that to us in plain English?
Well, practically, that is just the facts, to be honest with you, because one, when you increase the price of oil, what you're doing is that you're basically increasing the cost of doing business across the country, especially where your energy as a portfolio is very, very poor. Currently, there's no, as a state in Nigeria, that can actually boast of generating sufficient energy to drive the economy within the state. And that simply means by increasing the only one thing that everyone relies on to be able to drive industrial and commercial objective, that simply means you're going to be increasing the cost of operation. And people would want to leave the country to countries like Ghana, where inflation rate is around 10.6%, and elsewhere where they can get cheaper as an energy for their industrial plants. That's one. Two, by increasing the price of oil, what you've done is to increase the cost of transportation. And we all know that for you to move agricultural produce from, let's say, Kano to, let's say, a city like Calabar or Lagos, what that will imply is that you're going to increase the cost of transportation. So people will not want to do business, so they'll be forced to leave the business environment and to stay idle. So that in itself will impact negatively on the GDP of Nigeria. So the last thing we honestly want right now is to be talking about increasing the price of oil. That's just the truth about it. Okay, and it's sad to know that we have a president that seems to think otherwise and seems to be determined to frustrate the entire economic sequence of this country. So it's a big problem we have. Those of us who are saying no to fuel subsidy, we're saying that because we know that we don't have constant energy in Nigeria. The electricity supply is still very efficient, non-reliable. And by targeting oil and increasing the price, that simply means that people who run business won't be able to produce at a cost that is cheap. And what that simply means,
I think that we lost that connection. We're quickly going to bring Richard back so we can wrap up
creating the
this
right
conversation.
incentive.
Okay, we lost you for a second, Richard, but I have a quick question because of time. Now, economists have also warned
like
the presidency. Can you hear me? Yes, the economists have actually warned the presidency about the fact that we risk a social uprising of sorts. But before we go into that, before I let you go into that, we have seen a lot of hardships lately. The cost of living is continually skyrocketing. I know many people who were unable to afford meals while we were celebrating the Yuletide. We've seen a lot of economic migration from Nigeria to different parts of the world. I've heard people say anywhere but Nigeria. And the government is still saying you need to tighten your belts. You need to, brace yourself for what is to come. But the question is, where is the conversation on our refineries? We heard about the issue of modular refineries, but all of that has gone cold. What's happening to all these moribund refineries? What exactly is the issue? Why can't we, all of these monies that we spend to export the crude, refine it and bring it back into the country, which is making it a lot more expensive for us, apart from the benchmark worldwide? Why are we not having these conversations?
Well, let me start by saying that we live in a country where accountability is a big issue. And people don't seem to think that for the fact that they're elected, they're accountable to the people. Let me be frank with you. I happen to be one of those who fought for the Port Harcourt refinery to get a 1.5 billion US dollars needed to revamp that refinery. Sadly, a few days ago, we heard that a section of that refinery went up in flames. So the truth here is that it's clear that we are not even serious about revamping our existing refinery and building more. So that in itself is a very big problem. But on a second direction, I used to think that it's very important for us to sustain the conversation around building more refineries. Sometime last year, we had the vice president talking about modular refineries, suggesting that by building smaller refineries across, as in the Niger Delta region, that will enable us to increase our supply and address the issue of oil subsidy and the rising cost of oil. Unfortunately, what we've seen is just what I call rhetorics. We've not been able to see practical commitments towards that ideology that ensures that we can actually kind of refine our oil locally without necessarily sending it abroad and then losing foreign exchange earning. So I think first, accountability is the thing. Secondly, I think the major problem here is that we don't seem to have leadership that is committed to addressing some of this issue we are discussing currently. Until then, I still believe that Nigerians may just need to live with this very sad situation we find ourselves, where argument is shifted from building more refineries into discussion around fuel subsidy and transportation grants that basically we don't need.
Finally, I mean, a lot of people had hope in the PIA, which is now the PIB, hoping that, with the proposed deregulation, we now hear that, of course, the government is about to spend 900 million naira for subsidy in 2022. Just as you have said, there's a lot of window dressing. In a time where the rest of the world is moving away from crude and going to renewable energy and green energy, we're still even finding it very hard to even produce, and refine something that we have here free of charge. It really bothers me what the future holds. Now, don't forget, the NLC is going to be protesting on February 1. This might cause a delay of sorts, but how long can we hold this off? If the government is saying they're being burdened, they're spending too much money, if we now decide that we're going to have to pay this much for our fuel, what happens to the other things? Because don't forget, I mentioned the cost of living is still pretty high. Transportation in this country is purely powered by these, by fuel and crude energy. So where do we go from here? Is life going to be worse and getting worse and worse for the average Nigerian?
Well, let me start by saying that I believe Nigerians would rise to oppose it. Because the truth here is that what that simply means is if we all don't come together to oppose this policy of government, what that simply means is that you're working for just the oil merchants. And that simply means you're being taxed heavily to get the fuel you need to drive your vehicle or to power your generator or to ensure that you keep as in yourself in business. So I suspect that Nigerians will rise, and I don't like to think that we get to the point where the government will listen and then hardship would increase. Okay, so I would suggest that what the government needs to do right now is just suspend that policy. And I see Nigerians coming together. This is not just about NLC or the other trade union uniting to confront this policy and to defeat this policy. It's about all Nigerians coming together to unite and oppose this policy, because it is not in the best interest of Nigerians. It's not in the best interest of our economy. It's not in the best interest for energy development. And just like you rightly said, the world is migrating from toxic energy, which we refer to as fossil energy, to green alternative. And here we can't even just address the issue of energy as in poverty. So I'm of the view that Nigerians will unite to defeat this policy and to force the government to give up on this policy, because the policy serves none.
Well, we have to go. Thank you so much. Richard Inoyo is a financial analyst, and of course, he's been speaking to us about the fuel subsidy removal. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Richard. Well, that is where we say our goodbyes. But before we do that, we'd like to bring to you what Nigerians have to say about President Buhari's fight against corruption so far. I will see you tomorrow. I am Mary Anacon. Have a good evening.
I would say, in my own opinion, he hasn't. That is the truth. Because corruption is everywhere. Even before he came, though, there was corruption. But even now, you literally find it in places you can't even think of, to tell you how bad it has become. So to me, I would say no, he has not.
Anti-corruption, well, so far so good. He had tried to some extent, he's just one person out of many or numerous people. So he has actually tried his best. And I believe what we are experiencing is the best he could offer so far. But in terms of other aspects and other areas, he has done remarkably fine. Probably in terms of projects and infrastructure, I think he has been doing fine. But when it comes to anti-corruption war, I'm just going to score him like, on a scale of 10, I will score him like 4, basically. And I believe it's basically because of the group of people that has been working with him. When you are the head, you cannot come down and do everything yourself. So the people you put in place determine your success, the level of success you must have achieved at every point in time.
Anti-corruption. So what is not tackling anything? We are facing challenges. Corruption. What is corruption? But you hear the language Oshomole said. He said when you join APC, all your sins are forgiven. So what is it tackling? I'm asking you. He's tackling, but you had what when Oshomole was the chairman, what did he say? He said when you join APC, your sins are forgiven.